Outposts in Starfield are entirely optional, but if you really want to sink your teeth into the game, they can be incredibly useful for not only resource management, but upgrading your weapons and gear. There's a lot to the system that the game doesn't do the best job explaining, and it's easy to make mistakes without realizing, defeating the purpose of creating an outpost entirely. I've spent several hours with the system, and have put together my findings into these thorough steps, so that you too can maximize your efficiency while also hopefully avoiding some of the pitfalls. Here's what you need to know about creating outposts in Starfield. The number one reason for creating an outpost is to harvest resources. Resources can be used to craft materials that you can then use to build out your outpost as well as improve your weapons and gear. Probably important to note that resources are not required for shipbuilding. That is simply paid for with credits. So if you're looking to get into shipbuilding, you don't necessarily need to build outposts, although ships and outposts complement each other very nicely. There's also some story ramifications midway through the game that having an outpost can help resolve. Your primary goal when picking your planet to set your outpost on is to find one with abundant and useful resources. There are two key resources in particular that you should keep an eye out for: aluminum and helium-3. Aluminum is one of the most common, if not the most common component in numerous recipes, while helium-3 is necessary to not only power generators, but also link your different outposts together in order to share resources between them. These aren't the only resources that matter. A lot of the other key metals are very important to harvest as well, such as iron and lead. But most of the things that you're going to want to make in the game will require aluminum, and having helium-3 is the best way to power and necessary to transport resources between your outposts. The next things to keep in mind when picking a planet are location and gravity. I advise picking a planet close to the core systems, as for the majority of the game, you're going to be traversing between them quite often, and you don't want to build an outpost that requires several grav drive jumps to get to and from any of those main systems. And gravity, because the lower the gravity, the easier it will be to get around your outpost. And until modders patch in land vehicles, a boost pack in low gravity is the best way to get around. However, resources should always come before location and gravity, because if you set up your outpost correctly, you will rarely, if ever, have to visit it again if you so choose. Of course, picking a spot with a sweet view will also matter to some people. Unfortunately, the locations that serve as the best places to mine resources are often not the prettiest. If you can find a spot visually that you're happy with, great, but I wouldn't stress about it if not. To really take advantage of the outpost system, you're going to need to build multiple outposts anyway, since no single location or planet is going to have every resource that you need, and therefore you can save your outpost with visual splendor for down the line. After all, who wants to mix business and pleasure? Once you have picked your planet, the next thing you have to do is pick where on the planet to set up your outpost. When in the planet's orbit, you can scan it in order to reveal on the map where clusters of color-coded resources are. Pick an area with overlapping resources, and when you select the spot, it will confirm its most abundant resource, as well as what type of topography you're dealing with: mountains, deserts, plains, etc. Once you have picked your location and landed, find a flat area for your outpost. While building on a mountain can be great for the view, it can also cause complications when trying to place some items. Bring up your scanner and press the outpost button to pull out an outpost beacon. In the top left of the screen, it will show you which resources you can harvest within the area created by the beacon. Find a spot that allows you to harvest at least 3 different resources. In my experience, that's the most you can harvest at one outpost. If you can't find a spot in the immediate vicinity that allows you to harvest 3 resources at once, head back up to the planet's orbit and pick a different landing spot. Sometimes the beacon will annoyingly say that you can mine a resource within the boundaries it creates, but when you put it down, it actually hasn't calculated it correctly and a resource will just be out of bounds. All you need to do in this situation is go up to the outpost beacon, delete it, and place it more toward the one resource that is out of bounds. Once you've found the perfect spot, the first thing you're going to want to do is set up harvesters. Now, you will already need to have a few resources on you in order to create these harvesters. If you don't have the required resources, you might be able to mine some with a cutter in the direct area. If you want to expedite the process, the mining league in Neon in the Volley system sells a ton of different resources in large quantities. Harvesters can be placed in specific areas over veins of whatever resource that harvester is designed to reap. For now, start with one harvester for each of the 3 resources. You can set up additional harvesters later, even over the same vein, although they will require a certain amount of distance from one another. Harvesters require power in Starfield, which is where confusion can start to kick in. There are 3 different power sources you can have in the game: a solar array, a wind turbine, or a helium-3 generator. The first 2 options rely on the kind of environment you're in. The amount of power a solar array can generate depends on the amount of sunlight the location receives. The amount of power a wind turbine can generate depends on the thickness of the atmosphere. Note that building an outpost on a moon with no atmosphere prevents you from building wind turbines altogether. The last way to generate power is through a helium-3 generator, which requires helium-3 to power it. Helium-3 generators can supply way more energy than solar arrays and wind turbines, but obviously require a consistent supply of resources. That being said, if you're on a planet that can harvest helium-3, you can set and forget a harvester to fuel that generator, although you will need to set up a different power source at first anyway to power that initial harvester. Or if you build multiple outposts, you can create an outpost link between your outpost and another that does generate helium-3 and ship in the material consistently in order to solve that issue, which we'll cover later in the video. Thankfully, in Starfield, you do not need to connect power sources to objects like you did in Fallout 4 in order to power them. Everything in the outpost is going to automatically receive power from any of your power sources. Wireless charging gets way better in the future, it seems. In the bottom right hand corner, when in outpost mode, it will display needed power and total power. Needed power is the amount of power you need to power everything that you have in your outpost, and total power is the amount of power that you are currently generating. As long as your total power matches or exceeds your needed power, you don't have anything to worry about. Everything that needs power will be powered. However, as you start to expand your outpost, you will need to increase your power output. If your needed power starts to exceed your total power, the way it seems to work is that the power sources will power objects in order of distance, starting with objects that are closest first. However, if you end up running out of materials in order to create more generators, you can link power sources to specific things with a wire that you want to ensure remain powered in case that necessary object isn't close enough in the chain to be powered. The next thing you're going to want to do once you have set up your initial harvesters is to create storage for the resources that they produce. The harvesters will be able to store a limited amount of resources before they fill up and pause production. That won't resume until you move those resources to another location. Resources are broken down into the 3 basic states of matter: gas, solid, and liquid. Next to the name of the resource will be a symbol, either a teardrop for a liquid, a cube for a solid, or a cloud for a gas. Storage containers will need to match the state of matter to the resource you're harvesting. Unlike power, resources are not magically wirelessly transferred to the appropriate container. You do need to link those together. To do so, when in Outpost editing mode, highlight the harvester and press the Connect Link button. Then drag that line to the container you wish to connect it to and select it to make that connection. Once you have built the harvesters and an appropriate amount of storage to contain the resources they produce, you could just leave it there. Although I do suggest that you create other similar outposts on other planets that have different important resources at the very least. However, the fun part of having an outpost is creating your own space to either store and display the gear that you've acquired on your journey, a space to upgrade those items, or a place to just hang out. When it comes to this part of the outpost, how you build it is really up to you. The way I have my outpost set up is that I have several that simply exist to harvest resources, with one of those acting as a main hub outpost, where I have also built a workshop with different workbenches and a room to store gear that I am not currently using. I've also built a lovely office space for the NPCs that I have assigned to the outpost, but we'll get to those guys later. I do have one last outpost that I use as my home that does have some harvesters set up for some of the unique resources that the planet provides, but this place mostly serves as a place for me to just hang out and make look cool. It also has a great view. The last element is defenses, which are necessary for 2 reasons. The first is if your outpost is built in an area with aggressive fauna. They can choose to attack your outpost, which might require you to return to it and make repairs. Building turrets and such will keep those guys away. The second is that story beat I mentioned at the beginning of the video. To keep it as spoiler-free as possible, If you decide to use an outpost to assist in that situation, defenses at said outpost would be a wise move. You'll know what I'm talking about when you come up to that story beat. Even if you have multiple outposts generating a variety of different resources, you only have access to the resources you have generated, are storing, are on your person, or on your ship at that specific outpost. In order to have access to all of your resources across your various outposts, you need to connect them. You can connect outposts by building cargo links between them. There are two variations of the cargo link: intrasystem and intersystem. Intrasystem cargo links, or just cargo links as they're listed, can transport cargo between planets within the same star system and require zero fuel to manage. Intersystem cargo links can transport cargo between systems, but they require helium-3 to be powered. If you have built all of your outposts within the same system, you simply need the basic cargo link to connect them, building one at each outpost. Once they've been built, you should connect storage containing any resources you want to send out from that outpost to the cargo link's outgoing container, and connect any storage you wish to use for any incoming resources to its incoming container. Once that has been set up, you can use the command console at one of the cargo links to set which outposts you want to connect. If you have more than 2 outposts, you can share resources between all of them, but you need a cargo link for each connection. You can't have a cargo link connect to 2 other cargo links. Keep in mind you can only build 3 cargo links on a planet, so you are limited there as well. Connecting systems to share resources is a way to really maximize how useful outposts can be, but it also can get confusing. As I mentioned prior, and as I suggest you do if you are creating multiple outposts, pick one of them as the hub for all of your outposts to connect to, and only connect each outpost to that singular one. Once you have your outposts set up the way that you want them, double-check all of the connections for power sources and containers to make sure that everything is going where it needs to. One of the easiest mistakes to make is not having enough storage or not linking the right harvester to the right container, and having production shut down without you even realizing. When in outpost editing mode in the very bottom right corner, the last number shows how many resources you are producing per minute. Increasing this number can be done by assigning crew with outpost skills to your outpost and build them a cute office space if you choose, crafting better quality harvesters and power resources, or building robots. You can research those elements at the research lab, and to open up additional better research tabs, you'll need to invest in your outpost engineering skill. Other skills to invest in for outposts are predominantly, like outpost engineering, under the science tab. Geology, botany, and zoology increase the amount of resources you derive from inorganic material, flora, and fauna, respectively. Spacesuit design, weapon engineering, and chemistry open up more research lab options to craft mods for your gear and weapons, as well as crafting a wider variety of chems, respectively. Astrophysics allows you to scan planets from a greater distance, rather than needing to be in their orbit to scan them, which can make finding a good planet to put an outpost on much easier. And planetary habitation opens up the types of planets you can build outposts on. Some of the planets with the best, most abundant resources are going to be unavailable to you to put an outpost on from the jump, thanks to their extreme conditions. This skill not only resolves that, but it also increases the amount of outposts you can have at one time. As you can see, there is a lot to outpost building, but thankfully, even just doing the bare minimum with building harvesters greatly opens up the opportunities you have in the game, with some of the best gear and weapons available to you being the ones that you craft yourself. Plus, any resources you don't need for crafting can just be sold off, feeding into shipbuilding and other systems. Let us know in the comments what your experience with outposts has been, drop any tips you have yourself, and for everything Starfield, stay right here on GameSpot.